I just wanted to wanted to welcome you all and thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. And I know there's a lot of things we could be doing on a fall Saturday morning. I was telling Bonnie, I was thinking about all the leaves on my yard and all the things, but it just says a lot about you that you would take time to care about this ministry and about this work and really about the most vulnerable in your congregations. If you don't know me, I've spent probably the 15 years of my career serving vulnerable children and families in trauma and abuse situations. And so about a year and a half ago, I was asked by Pastor Bernie Hahn in the Iacota classes if I would consider being a coordinator for these two classes. And I'm pretty good at saying no nowadays. I have 4 young kids, so I'm really good at saying no. And so I just thought this would be another thing I'd had to say no to. But I prayed about it, and I felt pretty strongly about this being a ministry that I wanted to kind of to come alongside. And so I remember when I was in the trenches, so to speak, with those kids and families, and I remember really making a commitment after hearing so many of the stories and seeing the tears and the hurt. And I remember saying, I will never forget to stand in the gap for these people. I will never be quiet about what I know happens in our communities and even in our churches. And so I guess that's why I'm here. I hope that you kind of catch that sense of urgency that I often feel too, that we got to get this right, because our churches just really need to be the safest places possible for people and just places of healing and wholeness. And so thank you for committing to that too. I always kind of say this too when I talk about this, but I grew up, in a rural community in small town, Northwest Iowa, growing up thinking that these things just don't happen here. And it's just not true. These hard things do happen here. They happen everywhere. We are not immune to it just because we are quote unquote good, religious people. So I just want to thank you for committing to that. I have been so blessed and just so thankful for when I go into these spaces in the churches to be so well received by administration or at least the council and the pastors. And they've been so curious and open to learning more about this. And I've just been so pleased and really proud of just the CRC denomination in general. I guess I hadn't been involved in leadership, going to classes, meetings and stuff before. And I've just been so thankful to be so well received and kindly received in those circles. So I'll tell you a little bit more at the end about how, I have helped some churches in our classes and how I could potentially help for those of you that are here from Iacota and Heartland, how I could come alongside and how our team could come alongside. We have a couple members of our team here on this call. I see Heidi and John. I see Living Water. Those are people that are on our Safe Church team, and we'll be happy to help stand in the gap on some of these issues as well. So thankful for Bonnie. Bonnie has really been a great mentor for me as I stepped in this position, as I'm sure she has for many of you who call yourself Safe Church coordinators. And we're really thankful for her service. She'll be wrapping up her ministry service here in a month. And so this is kind of the last hurrah, I would say, one of the last ones, I guess, and just another testament to her commitment and an important contribution to this work too. So we're thankful for Bonnie to be here, who is the overall director of Safe Church Ministry of the CRC denomination. So thank you, Bonnie, for being here too. With that, I'll probably pass it over here to Bonnie. Bonnie, I'll probably just share my screen now, or do you want to introduce yourself and then I'll share?
Well, you can go ahead and share the screen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll do that.
That's great. Yeah. So I came to Safe Church because I always have had a heart for abuse issues, and I think part of that is my own experience that I've had, my own Me Too story, and I got involved hearing other people's stories when I was a campus minister with InterVarsity Christian Fellowship at Michigan State University. And I just kept hearing these stories from women who had been hurt and walking alongside. And so there was this whole Christian thing over here with InterVarsity, Christian Fellowship, and then there was this whole other piece of me over here that was more, I would almost say like, not violent, but really a feminist, take back, we'd always go to the Take Back the Night celebrations or marches. And there were these, it was like two worlds. And somehow I thought these worlds need to come together because the Lord has so much to offer people who have suffered from abuse. And if the church doesn't step up and do its part, we miss all that. There's a lot of organizations out there that are working to prevent abuse, a lot of organizations that work with children and people who are hurting, but the church has the Lord and his Spirit. And we have something that none of those other organizations have. So we need to step up and do our part because abuse is really a spiritual darkness. And to get it at its source, we need the Lord to walk alongside too, for a more complete healing, for more wholeness. And so I was really privileged to have this opportunity to be director of Safe Church that could help me bring these two worlds together. And so I've just been very happy. For 10 years I've been in this position, and it's not always easy. I was so glad to hear Tara say that, pastors and church leaders were very supportive of her and interested and wanting to know more. That's wonderful. That doesn't happen in every place. We still have people that think it doesn't happen here. We still have people that would just rather not talk about it. Abuse. Who wants to talk about abuse, right? So there is still some pushback. There is still really hard cases where I see people in the church wanting to protect the institution rather than protect the children and the people who have been hurt. So those kinds of things still happen, but that's why we're here. And I'm so glad you're here today. I just want to echo Tara's words that even on Halloween, here we are talking about Safe Church. So thanks so much. And so this is our Safe Church staff. It's myself and Eric, who has been with us about 3 years now, I guess. He's an ordained pastor in the CRC, and we're really thankful to have him. He brings a lot of energy and expertise. And we have Becky now in Canada. Becky's been with us, I think, a little over a year, right, Becky? She's here with us today, so thanks for joining us, Becky. She just works 10 hours a week with the Safe Church and also 20 hours a week with disability concerns. And so she's based in the Canadian office and works for both of those ministries. And she's just brought such a personable experience into her office, and just really been connecting with people in Canada in ways that we haven't connected before. And so we're so thankful to have Becky and so thankful to have Eric. And when I first started, it was just me. I was the director and I had an admin person. And so I'm just thankful now that we have a staff team with us. We no longer have an admin person because of budgets, but we do our own admin stuff. But I think this has just been a blessing to have the Safe Church team. So I wanted you to meet them. And it really takes all of us. This is kind of an old picture. I actually got this when I first came on as director. This was part of the materials I got, this with the little churches all around. But the idea is that there's a classes team in the middle that provides awareness and education, that provides support to churches. And then the advisory panel process is a very special process that is used when there's allegations of abuse against a church leader. So there's special training for that process. And it doesn't happen often, but it's a very good process to have in place when it's needed. So the team ministers to all the churches in the classes. And that's kind of the vision of how this is supposed to work. So you have to imagine this multiplied all over the country and all over Canada. So in every classes, there's a Safe Church team that can support churches in this area. Because we know pastors are busy people and people are doing other things. Someone has to be paying attention to Safe Church and to church safety. So yeah, so when I first came on as director, and this was in 2012, I gathered a group of people to who had been active in Safe Church, and we had this conference, and we talked about what is a safe church, what does it look like, how do we know if we're being successful, what are the key characteristics we want to see in a safe church. We went through this whole day-long process of everyone bringing all their ideas and then voting on the top ones and defining them. So we came up with these 5 guiding goals. And we would love to see every church in the CRC have a written safe church policy to protect those who are vulnerable, to prevent abuse. And it's not just checking off a box, oh yeah, we have a policy. Is it a good policy? Is it enforced? Do people know about it? Do people know why you have it? So it's more than just checking the box. Yes, we have a policy. It's actually making the policy a part of how we interact as a church community. Education is one of our goals, and that's for every age. We recommend a program, Circle of Grace, for children and youth. It's a great program that teaches God's love for us, how God wants us to be safe, and what to do if something doesn't feel safe. So that's a great program for children, but adults need education too. We need to understand abuse, the impacts, how to minister to people who have struggled, how to prevent abuse. So we all need education. So that's one of our mandates. We need to be able to respond well. And I already mentioned the advisory panel process is the Synod approved way that we respond when someone has an allegation against a church leader. Awareness, just increasing awareness, that kind of goes along with education. But in my perfect world, we would see, I talked about Take Back the Night marches. November in Canada and October in the US is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So I used to go to vigils and events in the community around those things. Sexual Assault Awareness Month in April, Child Abuse Prevention Month. I would love to see groups of people from churches at those community events standing and saying, yes, our church cares about this. God cares about this. We need to be in those places. So that's just part of our awareness. And then a commitment at all levels. Safe Church, I'm in an office in Grand Rapids we have actually the equivalent of 2 full-time staff people, if you add our hours together. And so, we can't be in every church. We can't be in every classes. We can't. So it really needs to happen at the congregational level. It needs to happen at the classes level. And then it's supported by our office at the denomination as well, but it needs to happen at all levels. We all need to be aware of these issues and care about them. So we can go to pass it over to Tara now.
Yeah. So we kind of talked about this, about how the Me Too movement and the Church Too movement have kind of collided. The Me Too movement began way back really in 2006 with the Harvey Weinstein victims. And there's been many victims that have come forward, out of some of the higher celebrity, I guess, to create awareness of how often sexual assault happens to people. And then Church Too movement came around 2016, 18, after a lot of the allegations from the Catholic Church leaders and Southern Baptist leaders. There was a big scandal there with some of the pastors, and so it was kind of this time not just for victims to come forward about the church, about particular individuals of the church, but also a time that created some awareness about how the church, as Bonnie said early, as an institution, tried to protect the institution over the protection of the actual victims in the church. And so, I have I think a while back when I did a training, I went on Twitter and I just put in the hashtag Church Too. And these are some that I pulled off there, just people sharing a little bit of their heart and their story about, how the church maybe didn't come alongside, they didn't listen, or they condoned behavior, or they enabled the abusers to kind of continue in the pattern of violence that they were in. And so I think it just says that it's just a testament that there are voices in the church that really need to be heard, that want to be heard, and that there's room for us to learn how to come alongside better and to hear them well. So I'll give you kind of a minute to read through these. I don't want to talk over them. I think their stories are worth seeing. So that's sad, right? But I think I think it's supposed to be sad. I think God wants our hearts to be broken for these individuals because He's hurt by this. And I just hope that even today, and the conversations that we have today, will make us think more deeply about what kind of policies, practices, perspectives, or just leanings that we have in our church that maybe might be silencing people or not allowing individuals to feel safe to come forward, or to not really take seriously allegations, or just things people are saying about how they're being hurt. So like we said earlier, we just really want the church to be a place that everybody finds wholeness and healing. And so one thing that I like to talk about when we talk about this is how often do these things happen. And one of the largest study really to date is the ACE study. I talked about this in a training earlier this summer. So if you're interested in learning more about that, I think there's a link on the Safe Church website with more of this. But for those of you that haven't heard, I always just kind of like to throw this out there. This was, a huge study. Kaiser Permanente out of California, partnered with the CDC, had over 17,000 participants, which is a huge sample size if you care about research. And really the sample was a lot of white middle class, because they were people that had health insurance. And so we know that if it was actually probably a more diverse sample, we might actually see different outcomes. But even so, it's actually pretty representative of the sample of people that a lot of conservative churches, see and minister to. But they had 10 questions in the areas that you'll see here. These aren't the actual questions, but just kind of the topics of them. And then this is the outcome of those questions of those 17,000 participants. So they were all adults, and they had to answer these questions about what happened to them prior to the age of 18. And so this is just childhood adversity. This isn't even talking about domestic violence and sexual assault that occurs after the age of 18, which we know there's some pretty staggering statistics in those areas too. So we can see the neglect and abuse, sexual abuse. 20% of people that said that someone in their home or someone in their care had been sexually inappropriate with them or sexually assaulted them. Physical abuse, emotional abuse. These numbers really aren't very comparable to the rate at which we identify them, especially in the state of Iowa, in regards to abuse investigations. So if you compare the data of how often abuse is actually investigated in Iowa and how often these responses, they really had no reason not to be honest. They weren't mandated to report their abuser. They weren't mandated to go get therapy. It was just like, did this happen to you? And then they just said it, right? We know that disclosure often brings a lot of other things, as far as just fears of the repercussions of abuse, fears of what could happen to their family. And so we know that disclosure often is very much stifled out of fear or just worry of what could happen if they told. So I think part of this slide that I'd like to share is that to just emphasize that, yes, these things do happen to our kids. They happen to our families. There's adults in your congregations. There's adults on this call that would have said yes to some of these ACE questions. And I think in providing an environment that we realize that these things happen, and that we provide an environment where it's safe for them to talk about it, and it's safe for them to say, I want to get help, and I want to feel better about this. I don't want to take it into my family anymore. I don't want it to, overflow into my marriage. And I think that's where really healing starts. Not to say that everybody has the same level of trauma from all these experiences, which I'll share a little bit about, but I do feel like we have a little bit of work to do in creating environments where it's almost just assumed, just like I did, that there's people on this call that it happened to, that if we assume that those people say, yeah, you're right, that did happen. And I'm glad that you named it, because now I can come forward and feel safe that that it's a possibility that it happened to me. So Iowa did a study too. You can look it up. It's called the Iowa ACE 360. I think there was about 7,500 participants. The data was pretty comparable from the Iowa sample. So maybe your state, if you're not from Iowa, has done something like this too. But it's a pretty comprehensive study. So I could probably talk all day about trauma just because of the work that I did. It really forced me to think about, okay, so these things happened. What does that do to them? And, you spend a lot of time as a clinician just trying to help them get rid of the intrusive thoughts and the memories and the physiological responses to the trauma. But then along came neuroscience and neurobiology, and this information that informed, what actually happens in the brain and the body when someone experiences trauma or violence towards their actual self and body. And it really empowered us as clinicians and victims to say, I know why now I feel fearful when there's really actually nothing to be fearful about. I know why I respond to my spouse that way when I feel cornered, or, it really gave them a sense of empowerment to know why these things are happening. And so I find it helpful to inform others who might be working with victims of trauma and violence so that way they don't take their behaviors and their reactions so personal, I guess. That they say, I get it. I mean, I know that they might not mean it like that, but their bodies are just really trying to survive. So this first one, so I was no good at science when I was a kid. I actually avoided all elements of science for as long as I could in my education. I had to take biology here at Dort, and that was enough for me. But now I really do enjoy a good science lesson, at least in the area of neurobiology. And so I've learned a lot about neurons and synaptic density, and neuroplasticity is this process of neurons that fire together, wire together. So I have a little baby at home. At birth, we have a very comprehensive set of neurons that's really largely focused on survival. It's just crying and eating and pooping really is all my little one does, and smiling. And so we start to make connections. I cry, mom and dad come. I feel scared, and then someone comes and makes me feel safe. And those neural pathways strengthen. It's like a highway that's very well traveled. So the more you use it, the stronger that pathway becomes. And so, when a child is abused, or when a young person is abused in this developing brain, we know they're very much developing in, early pubescent ages, and then later in puberty, it's this pruning process where teens and young adults go, okay, that worked. And then the other pathways kind of fade away. But it takes about 400 repetitions for us to feel like pretty secure in a situation. And we know that people that feel unsafe, frequently, kind of their brain becomes very wired around safety. And that's this downstairs brain picture that you see. There's a lot of firing and wiring that goes around safety. I need to survive. I need to scan my environment, make sure there's no threats. I'll do anything that I can to keep my body alive. That's kind of how God made us, really just a very primitive response of survival. And so that upstairs brain is the more complicated, diverse, and functional part of the brain in regards to problem solving, decision making, emotional regulation. All of those things occur, in this upstairs brain, we call it. And that's not fully developed until we're about 25. And so I always say that car rental companies have it right, because they don't let you rent a car until you're 25. But that it takes a while for that upstairs brain to be able to regulate that emotional center, because kids really only have that downstairs limbic system. It's very, very well developed. That's why you see kids with tantrums and whatever. But even adults who have been traumatized, that, you know, you'll look at them and be like, why are you making these choices? They just don't make sense. Like, you are not learning from your mistakes. You are not making, you know, any sense here. And it largely is because likely their brain has really been wired around survival, what has worked for them. It might be manipulation. It might be drugs and alcohol, because those things have created, you know, neurotransmitters that calm them, that soothe them. And there's been a healing effect in their brain that has been rewarded with that, and not from people, not from prayer, not from, you know, the church necessarily. So that's why it's confusing, I guess, when we work with this group. But I think it does help inform our work with them, when we realize that their brains have changed to wire around the trauma or the hurt that they've experienced. And so the good news about the brain and how God made us is that it's plastic, they say, you know, that these neural pathways can change. And, you know, more repetitions with maybe, you know, a safe environment, a predictable environment, one where they can kind of let some of those fearful pathways fade away, will allow them to kind of rewire. And so that's the hope that we have as a church, is that we can create that safe environment to help them really heal from the inside out. So, yeah, that's probably all I'm going to say about that. But like I said, I talked a little bit more about that in the presentation this summer that you could probably learn more about. So is that good, Bonnie? How do you feel
That's
good about
great.
moving forward?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's really, it's so important to know how trauma affects the brain and people. So often when you meet someone who's exhibiting those behaviors that come from trauma, it's important, instead of kind of blaming them or saying, oh, you're immoral, you know, it's instead of why are you doing that, what happened to this person that makes them do that, what happened? And so that's a better way to approach people sometimes. So it's just so important to understand that. So thanks, Tara. This kind of, you know, after the Me Too movement, our context in Safe Church really changed so much, because I felt like before that, we almost had to convince people that, yes, this really happens. It does. It happens. And people just didn't want to believe it. But after Me Too, people can't really say, no, it doesn't happen, because there's just too many people that have come out with their stories. So that really affected even at Synod, the last two Synods, 2018 and 2019. We didn't get to have one in 2020, but there was a service of lament that everyone at Synod participated in. And this picture is from that service of lament, where these stories were acknowledged. And the person that led the group asked how many people know someone who has suffered from sexual abuse, and about way majority of hands went up, that this impacts people we know. And so people were invited to come up and leave a stone at the altar, and in honor of those people. So I just thought it was a beautiful service. And then guidelines came out of Synod due to that. So it's something that we're paying more attention to now than we ever have before. So you can go on to the next slide. So one of the things that came out of those last two Synods is that there are new questions now in the annual yearbook survey that goes out to all the churches. So in that survey, they'll ask questions. Does your church have a safe church policy? Does your church have a safe church team? Do you offer training to elders and deacons and church leaders? Do you have a program of prevention, a designated response? So those kinds of questions are now in the yearbook survey. And that's been great for Safe Church, because we get all those answers back from churches. Although some of the answers we've gotten are not correct, we'll have a Safe Church coordinator look at that that data and say, wait, this isn't right. I know this church has it. Wait, this church has that. And so I'm not sure who answers the yearbook questions from a church, but that's something just to be aware of. Your church will get these questions. And so who answers those questions, and do they really know the right answers so we get the right data? But also it just kind of reminds churches, oh yeah, we don't do this, maybe we should. So it's just a really good resource. The new training for pastors and soon for church leaders is has just been rolled out. There's a pilot program that some people are participating in, and they're getting feedback from that, and then it will be finalized. And every new pastor coming into the CRC will now be required to do this 4-hour training in use and abuse of power, because all abuse is really about misusing our power. So that training, it will be available, and we're hoping to make it more available and also adapt it for church leaders. So I see someone in the chat that says they checked with the Safe Church person before answering those questions on the yearbook survey. Yay, that's great. That's the kind of thing we would like to hear. Another new thing that's in Safe Church that you might not know about, it just really started in July, is a restorative practices initiative. We really believe that restorative practices, which are based on principles of restorative justice. I don't know how many of you are familiar with those, but it's a way of relating to one another in a way of letting every voice be heard and putting us more on even footing when we discuss and talk about things. It's also a process for avoiding conflict and dealing with conflict and harm. So it just provides a lot of tools that we think will be great in churches. So you'll be hearing more about that as well as we move forward. Eric is kind of responsible right now for that initiative, and he's been talking to a lot of people and who are already using restorative practices in their churches and other places. And so you'll be hearing more about that. But really, like I said, we just have this very small office in Grand Rapids and in Canada with Becky, 10 hours a week. So it's really up to you what you want Safe Church to look like in your church. There's all kinds of opportunities. There's all kinds of resources. We do usually offer a mini grant program. So you could do something like the way Tara's doing this with her group. You could do something like that too, and we'll even give you some funds to help you, and we'll even provide support. So I just put here book studies. We've done some online book studies. We've done webinars. You could do a webinar watch party and watch one of the webinars we've already done and then talk about it. There's all kinds of things that you can do. So be creative, and then let us know what you're doing, because maybe it could help someone else too. So really the sky is the limit in terms of what Safe Church can do. Of course, we want our churches to be safe places, but really we want to change the world. So we want to have a world, it's about following Jesus and being the church. We know how much Jesus loved children, how much he was always on the side of the vulnerable and the people who were oppressed. And so if we're following him, we do that too. Then you can go to the next slide. I always like to put my grandkids, they're so adorable. So yeah, from generation to generation, like I said, I would love my grandchildren to grow up in a world where 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys is not sexually abused by the time they reach 18. I would love them to grow up into a world where they're respected and protected, and in churches where the love of God is evident in the way we treat one another, in the way we're a community together. So Safe Church is working toward all those things. And yeah, and we'd love just to have you be a part. This is where you can find Safe Church. We have a website with a ton of great resources. And if you can't find something, just call us and we'll be happy to help you find it. If we don't have something, that's how a lot of our resources are created, because people say, do you have this? And we'll say, no, we don't, but that would be really good. So we work on that. So a lot of our resources actually came from ideas from you and from churches. And if you need help with finding something, just please don't hesitate to contact us directly or call your Safe Church coordinator in your classes. We have stories, let's go back to there. We have stories on the network. This is where you can join in the conversation. So we'd love for you to just add your comments. And if you've never been to the network, there's some great articles there. So please look at the network articles and join in the conversation. You can like us on Facebook. In fact, you could just take out your phone right now and go to Facebook and like us right now on Safe Church. That'd be great. And something new for us is a YouTube channel. We've started developing these webinar recordings and we needed a place to put them. And so we have a YouTube channel. And right now it has this really long link, but if we get more followers, we get to choose our own link. So as soon as we have enough people subscribe, we'll be able to have just youtube.com/safechurch or something like that. So, so go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Like I said, check out the webinars there, have a webinar watch party. Take advantage of our resources. We love it when people do that. And yeah, and like I said, always feel free to contact us directly if you ever want to do that.
Yeah, and I'll take a minute to just say how, for those of you that are in Heartland and Iacota, how our Safe Church team can come alongside you. I think I mentioned before, but there's a pastor and a layperson or a congregation member assigned to each the Iacota and the Heartland classes. And so we're kind of here to support you and serve as just an information gateway to help you develop your Safe Church policies, maybe even establish them, or to answer questions about how you want to move forward. So I have learned that a lot of the churches are just in different places, and I really respect and honor that. I think just moving forward is our primary objective, with the ultimate goal of having a policy that we follow and honor, and just continue to be striving towards best practices and how to serve these people well. So I don't know. I just really hope that I've heard some just really sad stories about not just abuse of children, but just abuse of domestic violence victims too, when they come forward. You know, they have the courage to tell somebody in their church that these things are happening to them at home. They're being abused by their spouse. And I've heard really sad stories about, leaders telling them to go back home and to prepare them a meal and to say they're sorry, or to even have sex with them so that they would repair their marriage. And meanwhile, they literally have a bruise on their face, so it was just really sad to be in those places that those messages were still being communicated to to people that were being harmed. And that's why we do it. I guess that's why we just want to provide just more opportunities for you guys to feel like, your churches are safe places for these people. So I've visited councils. I've talked to them about maybe what they could do next. I don't have all the answers, but Bonnie does. So no, but I just felt like that. Like if I didn't know the answers, I would go ask somebody else. And so I don't claim to know everything. There is some transferable skills from my profession into this work, but there's certainly a lot of things that I'm learning about just the structure and organization of ministry and leadership that you have. And so I love to hear about what will work, what you think will work in your church, given the culture and all of that works together. So if you want me or someone in our ministry, Safe Church ministry, to come visit with you, or to have a phone call with you, I guess is probably more relevant this time. We'd love to do that, and just to brainstorm about how to help you move forward with Safe Church practices. So that's all I have. Oh, and I know I was going to say this. I was thinking of this with Bonnie, but if you heard Bonnie say something today, and then something, and you're remembering that there's like more sessions today, and you're thinking maybe I will hop on that session, you're still welcome to do that, even if you haven't quick put your name down. Those are more just for the presenters to know how many people would be on their call. So if you're thinking, you know what, we could do a better job with our curriculum or our policy or just whatever, you may still hop on those calls after this is over today. So, or this morning session at least.
Tara, are we going to do like a half hour at the end, just a chat room to let people talk if they want?
Yeah, I can definitely, I think what I'll probably do is just, you could use this link again. I'll have to hop off this link, and then you gotta log off and then log on to each of the individual links, but this link would still work. So if we want to do that, I'll hop on this very link of the opening session at the end at 11:30 and just see if anybody's around, and if anybody wants to talk, I'm really happy to do that. So does that sound like that would work?
That sounds great. And I will do that too. Like I said, I would love to be there and have those informal times just to talk, but the best we can do is maybe just at the end, we'll just leave this room open for a little while. If you want to stop by and say hi to Tara and I, or have a question or whatever, we'll be around for a little while after to talk.
And we can all drink coffee and eat cookies and act like we're together.
Yeah.
Because that's what we'd be doing.
I was just thinking we should have, we were trying to have we were going to have our Safe Church conference with our coordinators this fall, but, thinking of ways to do conferences virtually. And I would love to just, like send everyone like snacks, and how you always have at conferences, the chocolate on the table and stuff, send everyone a little box with chocolate and coffee, and, then we can get together. So we'll just have to do that on our own. But
don't forget the little bag with a pen and a notepad. We need that too.
That's right, and a bookmark.
So I feel bad that we can't really sit too much longer and take questions right now, but I do hope, and my email address and contact information, Bonnie's email address, I don't know, your contact information is on the Safe Church website. So you're sure welcome to email me or call me. My cell phone number's on that main page too. We'll be raking leaves this afternoon, but I'll get back to you next week if you do call me. So, but that's all I can think of. Bonnie, do you have anything else?
No, that's good. Yeah, do feel free to contact us. So we're going to have a little break now. Is that right?
Yeah, I think the next one starts at 9:50. Is that right? Yeah, 9:50. So I'll end this one so I can upload it to the cloud before I record the next one. So, but you may join this link at the end at 11:30 if you have questions or want to brainstorm something with all of us, or with Bonnie and I. We'd happy to help. So thank you all for being here. Appreciate seeing your faces.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.